Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Hmm? Huh. It's Spooktober.
Huh?
Bro, it's Spooktober.
It's Spooktober! It's Spooktober! It's Spooktober! It's Spooktober!
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 Spooktober. Spook.
Tober spook.
Tober
Tober spook.
Tober
Tober spook.
Tober spook. Tober spook.
Tober spook. Tober spook.
Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook.
Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober spook. Tober. Okay, so what are we gonna do, bro?
I don't know. I mean, I have a few ideas.
Yeah, I don't know. I had some ideas too, but I don't know. What are we gonna do? 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 What are we gonna do?
I mean, we could just do another It face-off.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I like that. Yeah. Another It face-off. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Let's do that then.
Yeah, cool. Okay, just let me get dressed, and then I'll give you a call back, and we can start the review. Cool. Okay, see you in a bit. Bye-bye.
Later. Perfect. Hey Aficionados, welcome back. Shawn and Miguel here, and today we're celebrating another Spooktober. This time we are pitting It Chapter 2 from this year, 2019, against Part 2 of the original It miniseries. I think we should start off by talking about the 1990 version. Again, starring Tim Curry as Pennywise. And I want to start off right away kind of just apologizing for what I said about his performance in the last video. I don't remember specifically what I said, but I wasn't too high on it. I feel like in order to see his full performance, you have to see both parts. And now that I've seen both parts, I really loved Tim Curry's performance of Pennywise. He really pulls off just this creepy, average kind of dude. Like the dude that you would see at a weird party playing a clown that you wouldn't want around your children.
What makes him so creepy is the subtext. We already know from the original film that he abused these kids when they were younger. And now as they're adults and they're facing him again, there really is this strong sense of coming to terms with childhood trauma and having to face their abuser. And what really sold me on this, they often see him in a public place. And there'll be other people around and it'll be broad daylight. And yet they're the only ones who can see him. And so it's this incredibly isolating experience of being in a crowd of people, but you're the only one who can see this evil entity. And it's very similar to that feeling that you could imagine of having to see your abuser in a public place.
I don't think the performances are that great. I mean, some of the acting is really bad, but there are certain things that are done well in terms of the performances. The way that I would describe it is when you see them coming to terms with what happened to them and the memories coming back to them, it's this kind of sweaty, anxious look on their faces. That's the best way that I can think of to describe it. And that really comes off to me as this sort of awkward feeling that you would get in a real life situation if you were faced with those same things.
Something I would really knock the new film for, it does a little bit too much. And you can really see that in the runtime. I mean, it's a 2.5 hour long film. It just never ends, honestly. And I was getting a little bit bored at times because the most interesting part of the whole It as a story is that subtext. The subtext of childhood abuse and dealing with that as adults. I mean, that's the whole plot of it, is that they have repressed memories that are now coming back to them. And now they have to work up the courage and the bravery to actually fight the source of their abuse. And in the new film, that subtext is lost in so much of this blockbuster grandeur. So to me, the old film's runtime, which I believe it was only an hour and a half long, it was able to do more with that hour and a half with less, precisely because it was very explicitly playing upon the thematic subtext of sexual abuse. And even you saw that in a few of the scenes explicitly, where Pennywise pretends he's one of the female characters of the group and he kisses Ben, I believe. And so Ben is making out with this disguised version of Pennywise, and then suddenly he realizes there's makeup on his face from Pennywise's makeup, smearing on him. And then Pennywise, turns back into his regular form and starts mocking him. And it's so grotesque.
The 90 version to me was just way better paced. And you said it best too, even though it was the shorter version of the story, it feels like it included more somehow. Even at the end of the film, a spoiler, I guess, here, they included the part from the book where Billy's wife comes and gets abducted by Pennywise and they have to rescue her. And to me, that's an important thing to include too, because that kind of raises the whole stakes of the end of the film and it gives them another reason to go in and confront Pennywise. Whereas that's somehow completely missing from the 2019 version, yet that end of that film seemed so long, there was no reason for them to not include it. I actually looked at the timing when I was watching it, and from the moment that they go in to confront Pennywise finally at the end of the 2019 version, there's still 50 minutes left of the film. Why is your ending dragged out so long? I mean, even in part one of the remake version, they're kids and they somehow dealt with Pennywise way quicker than they could as adults. That just doesn't even make any sense to me. It's not interested in exploring any deeper ideas either. So you're sitting in front of the screen for 3 hours with nothing to chew on or to think about. yeah, you're going to get bored. In fact, when I saw it for the first time at the drive-ins, I actually fell asleep during parts of it. And the part that I fell asleep during was that whole section where the group splits off and all of the members go on their own to sort of find an item to burn when they go to meet Pennywise. And that whole part of the movie to me just didn't work at all, because it's almost like the movie stops and then you're watching like a series of short films before the movie starts back up again once they get together. And I think one of the biggest problems to me with the new film, and I guess you could kind of make this argument about the original part two in a way also, but I feel like it's more apparent in the new one at least, is that it's kind of just a repeat of part one with the kids as adults, even to the point where they're just kind of rehashing their same old fears all over again. They're seeing like Pennywise almost come after them in the same sort of ways that he came after them in the first part. And it doesn't feel like the characters have necessarily changed all that much. I mean, even like Beverly, like somehow she's back in another like over the top abusive relationship that we get to witness her triumphantly, stand up for herself in again.
Talking about the new film, I think my favorite part of it actually are the flashbacks with the kids. And that's because the kids are so compelling. The child actors just do such a great job. They have great chemistry, obviously. They're witty. They seem very human in the way they interact with each other. The adults, you just don't connect or care about them as much. They're less dynamic on the screen than the kids were. So the flashbacks in the new film are better than the parts with the adults.
I think that both versions did a good job of casting the adult versions of the characters, at least in terms of looks. I think, like, for the most part, all the characters of the adult versions look the part, especially in the new version. In terms of the new version, maybe my favorite character is probably Richie, because Bill Hader, I think, did a really good job, and I think he was actually pretty funny as Richie. But other than that, I don't think really any of the other adult characters in the new version, I didn't really find them that compelling. Whereas in the old version, there isn't any particular character that really stood out to me as like, oh, that's a really, really great character. But I think that they all did a good job of playing that group of adult losers,
Some of them I just liked the characters better in the 90s version. For example, Mike. In the new film, he comes across as sort of duplicitous and a bit cowardly because he tricks the other members of the Losers Club into thinking that, he knows this ritual that's going to work, and then it ends up not working. In the original, he's much more honest and straightforward. I don't know, I felt like that whole plot element in the new film about like the Native American ritual just like felt gratuitous. And another character, just to go back to Pennywise, Tim Curry really seems like this creepy old man. He just talks like a regular guy, like someone who smokes too much and has a crude sense of humor and is overbearing, which really works with that theme of an adult who crosses boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, someone who is potentially abusive or a predator. Whereas in the new film, Pennywise as a character, from the way he talks to his mannerisms and everything, he doesn't seem like any kind of real person. He just seems to be like a construct, which makes sense because his identity is a construct that is just the imaginings of this intergalactic entity, but it doesn't connect as much on a human level. Even when they say it in the old film, it sounds like a coping mechanism, like they don't want to name what happened or what they faced, which, again, from a psychological point of view, is really compelling. Whereas in the new film, it almost seems like a proper noun.
I will say, though, that I think Bill Skarsgård does a really good job of playing the role that they want him to play. Like, he just, like, kind of melts into that character, You do forget that there's an actor playing this part even a little bit, you know what I mean? I loved the effects in the original a lot more than the new one, because obviously, in the 2019 version, it's just kind of CGI, and it doesn't look as good. Specifically, you got that scene where Stan's head is in the fridge, which was really just kind of grotesque and off-putting in a good way for a horror movie. And of course, that awesome stop motion spider creature at the end of the movie. That was so great. Although the one thing that really stood out to me in the 2019 version, and I feel like they might have even used practical effects to this based off of the way it looked. If not, it looks great for being CGI, and that's the part where, again, Stanley's head is in the fridge and then it kind of morphs into that spider creature. Like, that looked really good to me when I was watching that part of it. So effects to me, though, I would definitely lean more towards the 90s practical effects. I think it does a better job of giving that kind of unnerving, like this visceral, gross feeling.
Another CG aspect that I thought was done pretty well in the new one was the end where it sort of shrinks into like a baby. I felt that was actually done pretty well, especially when they reach in and they grab its heart out. I felt like that had a sense of texture and it had a sense of material weight that a lot of CG lacks. So that part was done actually, I feel, pretty well. I think the ending of both films is pretty weak. The ending of the original with the whole spider battle was a little bit like anticlimactic. However, I did think that the spider was a great metaphor for a predator, something that traps you in its web and you can't escape and you're sort of stuck, and the more you struggle, the more you sort of get caught up in it. I mean, that's a great metaphor for abuse and for abusive people, you know. They just showed a spider, you know, they didn't go too crazy overboard like in the new film. I mean, like, it's like a spider, scorpion, crab, monster, half clown thing. It's like a little bit much and you don't really get that metaphor as much.
And just jumping back into that dairy-centric theme that they bring up about the adults and the people of the town kind of ignoring what's going on, and you can't help but make the, you know, parallels to people, society ignoring abuse victims in real life. Even in the original, the theme of the movie is that they kind of have to get together as a group to take down Pennywise, and they can only do it as a group. They specifically say, like, we can't do it on our own, we can't do it individually, we have to do it collectively. And I think that's a perfect kind of parallel to real life, where a lot of these times, in order for abusers to actually get taken down, it requires the victims, the survivors, to come together as a group to take them down. And again, all of this is really just lacking from the 2019 version completely. I mean, the only little weird theme or subtext that I picked up on was related to Richie, and again, it wasn't fully explored at all, but the movie kind of implies that he's gay and hiding it, and he's ashamed to admit it, and he has feelings for Eddie even. And there's also these sort of themes of like homophobia going on in the movie too, especially like, I mean, the first scene opens up on a horrific act of these people. Basically, they killed a guy for being gay. But again, the movie has no interest in sort of doing anything with it, or really making any sort of statements about it, or really exploring anything deeper other than like these weird like things that they kind of like pick up and set down and don't do anything with. Again, there's really just nothing to chew on in this movie, and I think it's even worse because they like throw in these little sprinkles to like give you a little bit of flavor, but really just the whole meal just ends up being bland.
It is an evil creature that eats people. It's based on fear, and it just sort of represents everything bad in the world. Homophobia, whether that's racism, whether that's sexism or whatever, it just represents everything bad. There's nothing really there with what it represents as a monster and in terms of the experiences people have with it.
The horror aspects to me just don't even work as well in part two, to be honest. And I think a lot of that has to do with because the characters are adults now. I don't know, something about the new version to me, just the scary moments didn't hit home quite as well. And even the color palette of the 90s version is more interesting to me. It's got, again, this kind of low budget feel, but there's like all these bright colors in there. The new version is just kind of like ugly and like dark, and like there's just not much there to look at. Like, it's just really like gloomy looking. I guess gloomy. That's the best word. And then, of course, in the new film, they got to throw in that boring love triangle and make that a major part of the whole story, too. But with that, I think it's a good time to get into our final thoughts for this It Face-Off. It Face-Off Part 2. So for the 2019 It Chapter 2, we are going to give it 2.5 unnecessary hours of runtime out of 5.
It's a decently made film, high production values, decent performances, but as a whole, it's an average experience. It doesn't stand out in any way in particular. There's nothing really all that compelling there to grab you and make you remember it and make you want to come back for multiple viewings. It's kind of a serviceable horror film that goes on for way too long and really doesn't have all that much to say. So I don't think we can justify a score higher than 2.5, which is average.
Yeah, and I think the worst part of it all is that it just kind of makes you want to watch Chapter 1, which is just really disappointing because we both really like Chapter 1, so a disappointing follow-up. Again, it's not a bad movie, but sometimes just being middle of the road and bland can be even worse than just going off the rails. But let's get our rating for It 1990 Part 2. We're going to give this one 3.5 Spaghetti Men out of 5.
How you doing, Eddie Spaghetti?
Interesting note here, our ratings have actually flipped from the first video. Both versions, the 90 version and the 2019 version, hit kind of some of the same beats. I think that the 90 version just does it better. It does it with, less fat and, again, much more compelling with that subtext.
I think that the experience of watching the 1990 series was so much more satisfying, despite the clumsiness, despite the first part of the series being a little bit weaker. It all comes together for an experience that I think is much more meaningful, much more interesting to think about and analyze, and is a more enjoyable watch for me because of that.
What do you guys think, though? Do you prefer It 2019 Chapter 2 or Part 2 of the original 1990 It miniseries? Let us know in the comments below. And until next time, remember, whether it's liqueurs, movies, games, or beer.
If you're looking for reviews, you can find them right here.
Thanks for watching, and have a happy Spooktober. Ooh!
Ooh!
Beep, beep, Richie.